Hey there, do-it-yourselfers. It's been a while since my last video, but I'm back with another one on the inner CV boots for several Toyotas. The inner boots, for some reason, just wear out, don't last, and they crack and they split and, grease everywhere. So what I'm doing is an inner CV boot mod. It's the Porsche Bates boot, if you've ever heard of that. A very reasonable cost mod that will do what you need to do, especially with lifted trucks. So let's get right into it, and hopefully these tips and tricks will help you out. Thanks. Okay, so for this video, I'm not focusing so much on the removal and the install of the CV axle. As you can see, I've already removed the bolts for the lower ball joint. I've taken apart the taken off the brake caliper. I've taken off the brake rotor, taken off the axle nut, and removed the CV axles. You should be able to see in there. Yeah, right in there. There's the transfer case where the CV axle goes, and it's dripping uh, gear oil on my trash can lid. But in any event, what I want to focus on instead is the CV axle itself, the fact that I'm replacing it with a larger boot.
So I had some technical difficulties and I can't get all the video I wanted to show you.
We're going to focus in,
but I did want to show you the actual boot.
entails.
So here is the EMPI Bates Porsche boot. I'll leave a link in the description. But this is a much larger boot. You can see this section here. This is fitting over the CV joint, whereas the other boot did not fit all the way over the CV joint. Matter of fact, one tip is inside of this part of the boot, there's actually a part of the old boot. It's just the edge where it was clamped. That part I cut off around the clamp and left it in there. That acts as a baffle in there to help keep the grease on the CV joint. So that's one tip. Another tip is these worm clamps, stainless steel worm style clamps. I didn't use one, I used two. Okay, that gives me a fastener on each side, and you can kind of see it better on the smaller one. You can see there's a fastener on each side. So again, I'll try and leave a link in the description, but by using two of these, you get better pressure on both sides of the shaft. Same thing for the larger one. And again, there's a video on this, great video, and I'll also leave a link to that as well. But it just has music, so I was trying to give more of an explanation. Okay, so here I am at Home Depot, but you can go to Lowe's or whatever hardware store you want to go to. I used two of these number 6 stainless steel hose clamp, half-inch band, 3/8 to 7/8. You can see. So I used two of these. These are made in the U.S., so that's a plus. Two of those for the smaller side of the boot, and for the larger side of the boot, slid on down here, I used 136 size and 120 size. So again, these are both half-inch bands, all stainless steel, so they won't rust. But that's what I used. I used one of each of these and just tied them together. You could use two of the bigger ones. You're just going to have more probably hanging over. But you could use two bigger ones too. Two smaller ones probably would not work. Like I said, I just used a smaller one and a bigger one to minimize the amount of the band hanging over. So. Okay, yet another tip is to use some dry lube, which I had a spray can dry lube on the outside of the boot. Again, it's larger than the factory stock boot, so it has a tendency to rub in spots, as you can see. So you want to coat the outside with that dry lube, and that'll help keep it from binding, and it'll be able to slip better. And then probably a final tip is go ahead and change the gear oil when you do this on the axle on both sides. Well, when you change the boots on both sides, you might as well change the gear oil. There is the fill plug. Make sure you can get that off first. Takes a round gasket, metal gasket, and so make sure that one works first, and then looking for the drain plug. Drain plug's right on this side, facing the passenger side of the truck. So you might question, what type of gear oil do you use for the front axle? Well, it's right on the axle itself. 75W90. I used synthetic Mobil 1.
On to the FJ Tacoma 4Runner CV boots. So I've been stuck in inner Toyota CV boot purgatory. I'm working on a FJ Cruiser right now. Already did it on my Tundra. I've got a Tacoma I'm working on, but in any event, the inner CV boots can be an issue, even if you haven't lifted your truck. So one of the things, a good tip is when you're taking off the tie rod end, which a lot of times I don't like to do, but recently I've made it much easier. A lot of people will show you, let's just beat on this thing, right? Let's get a hammer or a mallet or something, and let's just beat on it right here, right? You don't want to beat on it right here because that'll just mess up your tie rod end. But let's beat on it right here. Well, that just rarely works for me. I don't know. Maybe I'm just special. But what I wanted to do, instead of getting a pickle fork, right? I mean, that works, but then that messes up your boot. Picked up this tool here at Advance, and I'll try and leave a link for it as well. But it slides in here, doesn't mess up your boot, and once you get this thing in place, and here, I'll show it to you. Okay, here it is. So I've put it in place, and you can see where it's up against the metal on the bottom, not the boot. So I'm going to save the boot. I've moved my castle nut up to where it helps protect the top of the ball joint. And now I'm going to take a 21mm socket and a socket wrench. I'm going to torque on this thing. It's going to push this piece up, this piece down. It's going to pop that thing out of there intact and still in good shape, easily reusable. So this is what I like to use for this. It's great for tie rod ends. Not so good for ball joints. They say you can use it on ball joints. I've tried to use it on ball joints. No, you're going to need a better, more with a heavy duty ball joint separator. I can't really do it well one-handed, but I'll do it here real quick and show you the result. Okay, I think I was able to get the camera in place. Got my 21mm. Tighten her down. Takes a little bit of force, but it's going to apply it to it, and it'll pop when it's ready. There it goes. Boom. And release it. Take it off of there. Castle nut grabbed it before it took off down towards the floor. There you have it, folks. Still intact. You can still use it, which is nice. Okay, more tips on the CV axle boot mod.
I've got the 2 axles out of the FJ Cruiser. I've got the driver's side here, which is the after. I've got the passenger side, which is the before. Using the EPDM boot from CarTech, same one that I used with the Tundra. I'll just go through the features real quick. You can see pretty obviously the size of the EPDM boot. The Bates Porsche boot is what it's also called. I'll leave a link in the description. But you can see the size of that compared to the factory. We reused the factory piece right here. I just cut it at this edge. Kept this clamp in place, clamped this boot on top of that using the stainless steel clamps that I had talked about, 2 of them to get a more even grip. The larger ones here, obviously the smaller ones here. You can see where these things commonly fail. Fail right here at the smaller end. This one's just shooting out. Some people will try and put another clamp on there to help it out, but I'm just going to replace the boot. This boot's cracked. It's not in good shape. One of the few things about Toyota apparently that doesn't hold up are these inner CV boots. Commonly they come apart here. Matter of fact, when I took apart the driver's side, it was not leaking, but then when I was taking it apart, it split right here completely and broke open. So that's a bad spot on these. But this one's in bad shape as well, obviously. So, but I'll save this piece. I was going to save this piece on the driver's side, but I opted not to because this boot has a hard time getting over, which is a good thing. Has a hard time getting over the shaft, so it's good and tight on the shaft. Not only that, but there's a detent here, and I might be able to show it a little bit later. But there's a detent for this to ride in. Once you get past that detent, there's a lip. So that's a good spot anyways. You can just bring this Bates boot out past this lip right here and you're in good shape. You've stretched that boot a little bit further out to give you more clearance where your ribs won't rub as bad. That's what I've done here. It's kind of hard to tell in the picture here, but it does go past the point that this one goes past. So that's just a couple tips I wanted to show you. I will have a couple more tips coming up on these CV axles. A couple more things. I do like to stick with the factory Toyota axles. That's why I'm going to the trouble of replacing the boots and not just purchasing aftermarket axles. Seen a lot of information on forums saying that they're not as good and they don't last as long, so I prefer to go with the factory, and that's what you bought the Toyota for, was the performance and the longevity. So and it's just a weird combination here. You see these look like probably the original boots on the outer side, and they're in good shape. I mean, they've held up really well, but the inner boots just do not cut the mustard. Okay, wanted to show you this passenger side of the FJ Cruiser. I have cut open the boot, obviously, just kept this upper piece to clamp the new boot on. This is the detent I was talking about. It's the same on obviously the FJ, but not only that, but the Tacoma, the 4Runner, even the Tundra. You just pull that boot beyond. This is where the factory clamp goes, but you pull it beyond that, past this lip, and then that gives you that little bit extra stretch, so your ribs of the boot have that extra give. And you can see here, obviously water and things got into my grease, so definitely good that I'm changing this right now. A couple other tips as I reassemble the passenger side axle shaft. Make marks on your shaft and your cup so you can realign them properly. Also did that I made scribes on the shaft up here and very slight scribe on the actual CV joint, and lined all that back up. Other tip on this retainer clip here that comes out, snap ring pliers will take it off
especially if you have a snap ring and a screwdriver. It helps to have a couple different hands involved there. Putting it back on is more difficult. I recommend using these, which are called lock ring pliers. Purchased them at Advance for right around $20 out the door. You can see the different type of edge on it, and it's able to grab the actual lock ring because there are no small holes in this particular lock ring. And this is on the FJs and the Tacomas and the Forerunners. The Tundra is actually easier, in my opinion, because there's it actually comes apart from this side of the CV joint, and this whole thing comes off. Slip the boot on, so it's a little bit different process for the Tundras. All right, a few more pointers here. You can see where I've mated the new boot up with the old boot, serving as a baffle. I had to move the short end out even more, just to allow for the extra play and to keep the ribs off each other. Per the CarTech instructions, going to use some graphite lube. I'm going to spray that down all over this new boot. I can even spray it on this boot too, for that matter. And on this end, I'm going to put some anti-seize. I had a little trouble getting the passenger side off, so the anti-seize will help keep this in good shape and moving in and out when it needs to. All right, thanks.